The rain had started just after noon, light at first, then falling with a kind of steady insistence that felt like memory itself, gentle but relentless. I stood by the window, fingers wrapped around a chipped blue teacup, the same one I'd used for years without really thinking about it. The house was quiet, as it had been for most of the last decade. But lately, that silence had begun to hum with a different kind of energy. Something had shifted. I could feel it. My name is Eleanor Hart. I am 71 years old. I've lived in this same New Hampshire farmhouse for 43 years. My late husband, Robert, built the porch with his own 2 hands. He died 11 years ago. The cancer came quickly. By the time we knew what it was, he was already slipping away from me. After his passing, I stopped opening certain drawers. I let the attic collect dust. I moved through the house like a shadow, quiet and careful. It was easier that way, less painful. But something changed last month. I can't explain it exactly, but I started waking up before sunrise again, started baking sourdough bread, even though it was only me to eat it. I began listening to records we hadn't touched since the 80s. I think it was the loneliness. Or maybe it was finally time. One morning I went up to the attic. Not for anything specific, just to be in that space again. The air was dry and musty, carrying a strange warmth. The floor creaked under my bare feet. I moved boxes, one by one, brushing away years of cobwebs and moth-eaten fabric. Then I saw it. A wooden panel in the far wall, slightly cracked. The kind of thing you'd never notice if you weren't looking for it. I pressed my hand against it. Gave in. Behind it was a hollow space. Inside, tied with an old blue ribbon, was a bundle of letters. They were his, Robert's, but not to me. Not at first. I didn't cry. I didn't panic. I just sat there, cross-legged on the attic floor and read. The first letters were written in 1967. He was 22. The handwriting was unmistakable. But the words weren't meant for me. They were addressed to someone named MJ. The tone was tender, romantic, full of longing. First I felt like I was intruding. But then, as I kept reading, the story unraveled. MJ was a woman he'd known during his years working in Boston before he met me. Someone he'd loved deeply. Someone he'd lost. The last letter to MJ was dated March 3, 1974. That's the year Robert and I met. And in that final letter he wrote, "If I ever find peace, it will be because I let you go." He had buried that chapter of his life, and he never told me. Not once in our 40 years together. For a moment I felt betrayed. But then I realized something else. He had let her go. He had chosen me. And perhaps he'd hidden those letters not out of shame, but out of reverence. For the person he once was, for the journey that led him to me. I put the letters in a small wooden box and brought them downstairs. Over the next few days I read one each night. It became a ritual. Like watching the rain. Each one opened a window into a man I thought I knew completely. And strangely, I began to feel closer to him. One evening while reading a letter I noticed something odd. There were faint pencil marks on the back. Almost like sketches. I flipped them over carefully. And there they were. Rough outlines of a woman's face. A narrow chin. Soft curls. Always drawn from behind or in profile. He'd been trying to hold on to her image. I wondered if she was still alive. If she remembered him. If she ever received the letters. But I didn't try to find her. That night, I sat on the porch in my robe, knees curled under me, a wool blanket draped across my shoulders. The stars had come out after the rain. I spoke to him aloud for the first time in years. "I read your words," I whispered. "I know who you were before me. And I still love you." The wind answered, rustling the leaves like a soft applause. Over the next few weeks I began writing again. I hadn't journaled in years. But the words came easily now. I wrote letters. Not to Robert, not to MJ, but to myself. To Eleanor at 20, 30, 40. To the parts of me I'd buried alongside the years. Cooked new recipes. I wore my old perfume again. I even painted the kitchen a ridiculous shade of sunflower yellow. This wasn't about mourning anymore. It was about returning to myself. One afternoon, I walked into town wearing a bright teal blouse I hadn't dared wear since the early 2000s. A neighbor complimented me. I laughed without apologizing. I felt radiant. Not in a vain way. Just alive again. On the anniversary of Robert's passing, I placed the box of letters in the fireplace. I watched the flames curl around them, lifting the paper into smoke. Not to destroy them but to set them free. There are still quiet days. Still mornings when the ache returns. But now I know something I didn't before. Grief doesn't just close chapters. It reveals the ones we never knew we needed to read. And sometimes, hidden behind walls, are the truths that bring us home to ourselves.